ready? You got me running. Shake it.
I am Meredith Hirsh, and this is Working Healthcare, the podcast where we pull back the curtain on the $4.9 trillion American healthcare system to understand how it works and who it's really working for. If you've been with us since the beginning, you heard that right. I did not misspeak. In just the year since we launched this podcast, annual healthcare spending has jumped by $400 billion. Let's be real. American healthcare costs more than the entire GDP of Germany. And yes, we have world-class hospitals, cutting-edge technology, and some of the most brilliant minds in medicine. But we still struggle with access, equity, and outcomes. It's not that we lack the tools. We absolutely have them. The problem is how we're using them. It's like buying a first-class ticket only to end up crammed in a middle seat next to the bathroom, holding a surprise bill for $3,000. And here's the thing. We can't fix this hot mess if we don't understand it. That's why I talk to everyone from rural hospital CEOs to pharmaceutical execs to med students who still have hope in their eyes. Some are old friends. Some are brand new voices, but they're all helping us break it down. In our first year, we hit nearly 8,000 unique listeners. That's 8,000 people who decided they actually wanted to understand what was going on behind the curtain. And I see you out there scrolling through formularies and wondering what the heck a PBM actually does. So what's in store for this year? We're shaking things up a bit. We're tuning into you, our doctors, executives, pharmacists, students, and everyone else who has chosen healthcare as a career. You're not here by accident. You're here because you care. We've chosen this path to make a difference, and we're diving deeper into the topics that matter most to you. The pharmacy benefit manager drama, for one, the not so advantageous part of Medicare Advantage plans, why all types of medical practices are feeling the squeeze from solo clinics to big health systems. The burnout crisis. 62% of physicians report symptoms of burnout, according to the AMA. Health insurance contracts that feel like you need a law degree to read. And don't even get me started on how AI and IT are promising efficiency while also adding about 47 more passwords to your day. We're also exploring bold new business models, private equity, MSOs, DSOs, vertical integration, and asking, are these models helping us thrive, or are they just helping us survive with fancier acronyms? And let's not forget about independent practices. They're the backbone of our healthcare system, offering personalized care and community connections. But with rising costs, regulatory pressures, and changing reimbursement models, the question remains, can independent practices survive in this evolving landscape? Should they? And if so, how? And here's a thought to chew on. What if the 6 most expensive words in healthcare are, we've always done it that way? If we want to change the system, we can't play not to lose. We have to play to win. That is why I'm bringing on a familiar voice, Mike Chavez, a listener favorite, a master of connection, and now a regular here on Working Healthcare. And he loves to say, you cannot play not to lose. Today's episode is a standalone deep dive into where we've been, what we've learned, and where we're going next. We're talking leadership, practice management, real solutions, not pie-in-the-sky ideas, but the kind that could actually move the needle if we're brave enough to try. So whether you're a med student, a lobbyist, a solo practice doc, or just someone wondering how we ended up with $500 EpiPens and surprise $4,000 ER bills, this one's for you. Mike, welcome to Working Healthcare again.
Thank you, Meredith. I'm so grateful to be back, and thank you for having me back. I also want to thank everybody that listened. It was very humbling getting all the nice messages and the positive words about our episodes. So thank you.
I got a lot of that feedback. And I remember on the episode, I said, I'm going to Joe Rogan it because you love Joe Rogan. Although I haven't gotten past the first hour of any of his episodes. And you told me the second hour is actually the best. And I'm like, I don't have enough time to listen for 3 straight hours. So I need to just fast forward and listen to the second one. But that you and I have a good, comfortable feedback back and forth. And we have a similar background in the sense that we've both done administration work.
Mm-hmm. And honestly, with the first one, I was a little nervous because I've known you for quite some time and we get along well, but we're so different and our communication styles are different. But thank goodness it went over well and people enjoyed it. I
know before this podcast, I said we can play ebony and ivory, but I get to be ivory. You can play ebony.
Fair enough.
All right. So I asked you before this podcast, like, what are we going to talk about? Because a lot of people came up to you. A lot of people came up to me. My executive coach was like, oh my God, Meredith, I know what your TED Talk is going to be now. So that's super cool. And I'm like, okay, how can we, I have to stop saying I'm, a Gen Xer. That's where I go back to. What can we talk about to really help doctors and practice administrators and all of those who are struggling within our healthcare community, not just survive, but thrive?
Absolutely. And I love what you said in the beginning about independent practices being the backbone of healthcare, because they absolutely are. And I think that if the unfortunate thing happens in which bigger corporations start to take over these smaller practices, I think it's going to be unfortunate for everyone, including patients, and most importantly, patients.
Yeah, people ask me all of the time if I have a solution. Okay, Meredith, the American healthcare system's broken. Do you have a solution? I'm like, if I had a solution. So that's why I interview different healthcare leaders to try to find and figure out what a solution is. But I don't know if private equity is the solution.
I don't know if it is either. Again, I think that what it comes down to, especially in rheumatology, and we're in rheumatology, so I know that best. And the issue that we've seen with private equity coming into rheumatology is they don't understand rheumatology. Mm-hmm. And they tend to look at the bottom line and what's going to help for the bottom line. Rheumatologists are very patient driven, and they look at what's best for the patients first, I think. And they also have to be mindful of what's best for the business, which is important.
So interesting again that you say this, because I had somebody out of the blue text me and ask me about a company that he and I are both familiar with. And it's a private equity company. And he just said, do you know anything about this company? And we were back and forth. And he said, I've had a lot of people reach out recently about private equity and acquisition in rheumatology. I said, oh, really? Tell me more. And he said, first they go for GI, they go for derm. They were looking at internal medicine. He goes, now I think they realize that rheumatology can be very profitable. And it can, but it can't. And I'd love to hear your thoughts on what you think the negatives are of private equity, or the way you see them in our American healthcare system.
What the negatives are. So I think the negatives are what we just talked about, and they're not necessarily sticking to the values of like an independent practice. So I'll relate it to business. In business, I've been part of companies that are very small. It's startup companies, and I've been part of companies that are very large, Fortune 10 companies. Mm-hmm. It's so difficult to maintain the values as you grow as a company. It was one of the things at my former company that I was worried about, and I spoke to our CEO about often. And I said, my only fear about our growth and our trajectory is that we're going to lose this culture and the positivity of our culture, and sticking to our values, because as you grow, it's very difficult to do that. So again, relating it back to what we're talking about, I think it comes down to, as private equity comes into a small practice, how do they maintain the values? And the values in rheumatology are simple: patient first. So I think that's where it becomes hard for them to maintain those values, I think, and especially with a private equity company that doesn't maybe understand rheumatology, obviously, as well as the rheumatologists. So it's a difficult thing.
I just had Carl on my podcast 2 episodes ago, and he's a coach, and he talked all about company culture and why company culture is so vital for any company, and whether you have to have those hard conversations or whether they're disciplinary conversations or whether they're just talking about professionalism. And we go back to private equity. You're literally giving your company new ownership to come in and say, okay, do with it what you want. Is that really what private equity is doing? Or are they saying, hey, we're going to give you money at the front end. We're going to help you scale your company, or what is the word? Not a roll up, right? We'll roll you up into what we have created as this great sustainable platform. And we'll show you how to do it better. So you look at Six Sigma, right? Or lean, where economies of scale. We're going to do better for you, but we're giving you the upfront investment, but we'll now we'll reap all of the benefits down the road because of the growth.
So I think that they have to have a balance of giving a smaller practice the scalability and the funds to make all these decisions, but also giving them enough autonomy to know where to drive the business, because I don't think that private equity knows best for especially rheumatologists. So I think it's important to have that balance. I love that you talk about culture, because I think that that's the most important thing in a company outside of the leadership, and leadership is tied directly to culture. Another book, Culture Code, is probably the best book I've ever read on culture. I don't know have you heard of the book?
No, I haven't.
It's great.
I thought I was well read and I have a great
Code.
library, but apparently I'm not when I talk to you.
It's probably the best book that I've ever read on culture. And one of the things that they said in there is that you can have an amazing product and not a very good culture, and you're not going to be successful. Mm-hmm. The reverse is also true. If you have an amazing culture and the product isn't the best, you can still be successful. Mm-hmm. So culture's number one. And if private equity can figure out how to maintain that culture of a private practice, I think they'll be successful. But again, they tend to look at the bottom line and what's adding to that bottom line, as opposed to what's most important, which is the patient care and service.
Yeah. And so when Justin Hand was on the podcast and I interviewed him, what you explained was similar to what was happening with my dad in the 90s. And they were buying out doctors' practices in their entirety and really paying the doctors out and weren't requiring them to stay. It seems like private equity now is only paying up to maybe 40%, or rather 60%, I would say, of the company. I was told typically an owner has to keep about 25 to 40%, so they have skin in the game. And then also stay on for a period of time. So maybe even 10 years ago, private equity was only requiring owners to stay on for 2 years. And now they're looking at a 5-year trajectory even before they flip it again, so that the owners have investment, and then tying that 25 to 40% that's retained to some type of second bite with the growth of the company. And I think from what I'm hearing about others in the industry, and I went to a private equity conference in Miami in February for 2 days. It was quite an interesting conference. I never need to do that again, to be honest with you, Mike. Never. And it wasn't because it was private equity. I didn't like the people I was hanging out with.
They're a different bunch. They're different.
Yeah.
I've been to a couple, and they were fine. They're just different.
Yeah, but you can play in that arena better than I can. And I don't say that negatively. It's actually a positive, because you can be a chameleon and move around. As somebody called me this morning, I told you they called me spicy. And I said, I'll take that. I think that's an awesome adjective. But I'm not a chameleon, and I don't always navigate well in all circles. And it was like the bros were the ones at private equity.
Right. I think it comes down to, a lot of it is just kind of meeting people where they're at. And I reread a quote that I wanted to talk about, and it was truly listening to somebody is completely putting yourself aside. So, it's easier to become a chameleon when you're doing that, and just kind of putting yourself aside and listening to where they're coming from and meeting them where they're at.
I'm a lion. It's okay. We eat chameleons. No.
Right.
I have to work a little harder on being that chameleon. No, but in the right situation. And I think a lot of people are going to private equity or looking at that route because one of two things I'd love to talk to you about. The first one is succession planning. So people who own the company or the older physicians or people who, I'm not going to talk about burnout. That's number two. The first one is, who's going to take over the company? Who are you leaving it to? Are you just walking away? Then what happens to your patients, right? That's the first one. My second is burnout. So let's talk about leadership and succession planning.
Sure.
How can physicians, and I'm going to say physician owners, how can they create a succession plan so that their independent medical practice can continue to thrive?
So first of all, one of the things that they need to understand, and I don't know that a lot of them do. I had a conversation with a rheumatologist this past weekend in Destin at CCR, and she was talking about leaving her practice. And I told her what
she was the owner?
She's the owner. And
the only owner.
Right.
Okay.
And what she didn't understand is that she's the value. So once she's gone, the value is gone. So she hadn't really thought about it from that perspective. And she had a little bit of an epiphany moment and said, you're absolutely right. And I said, even if you're planning on retiring in 5 to 7 years, you should start planning now, bringing in another rheumatologist, teaching them what you know. And now there's still value in that practice, because if you don't, the value's gone when you leave.
So what do you do in a practice like mine? Okay. At this juncture, we have 10 providers, 10. We're losing one. Wow. She needs to move out of the area. Yeah, did you realize we were that big already? No. Holy crap, that's right? Awesome. Congrats. So we'll be 9. And my husband is no longer, yes, it's called the Hirsh Center, but he's no longer the only physician, right? He's not the only draw into the medical facility, but he is the only owner. And we have another doctor who started in August, and he has a desire to have some type of ownership. And we're going to have to look at what that is and what that means. Right now, the company is so large, right? To buy into it, I don't know if that makes sense. Like, there's so many different business models. And so looking at somebody like me, or let's say looking at a medical practice that might have 30 doctors and 9 of them are owners, because that does exist. What do you do for those climbing up the ranks? Do you just give them partnership? I mean, are you literally giving your practice away, or do you have some type of buy-in? Like, what are the models?
So there's a lot of different approaches. I think it really does come back to culture, because if you have an amazing culture and you can pass that on to the younger doctors and maintain that, then they're going to be fine. And you wouldn't necessarily have to give away partnership. Eventually you would, and how that works out, it's kind of up to you. I don't know that it's realistic for a rheumatologist to buy into a business like yours. I know you guys have an amazing culture. I see it all over LinkedIn. You're celebrating your employees and all those things. So I think maintaining those things, passing those values on to the younger rheumatologists, is the most important thing.
But this is where I struggle. We've built a small business. That's what we've built. And in the rheumatology world, we're really considered a mid-size rheumatology practice at this point.
Mid to large.
Yeah, well, I don't know about that. I know some of these guys, they have like 30 doctors, but I'm going to go with mid, Mike. I'm going with mid.
There's only a few.
Mid. Yes, I'm one of the few mid, but we're mid. And we have one owner, and we are a successful company, and we do have assets. Why would we give these away?
I mean, you want them to have skin in the game and feel like they're part of the team. I think you can do that without giving up ownership. I can tell you that another thing that you could put into there is how their pay structure is. And I don't know if you want to get into any of that, but
I'd love to learn, because this is my challenge. Okay. I pay really high, and then I'm supposed to also give away part of the company. Like, that doesn't make sense. I feel like everyone coming out of fellowship now wants both. They want to have some ownership, but they're not willing to necessarily work the hours required or spend the time and invest the energy needed to do it. And then on the flip side, they also want a super high salary. And you're like, something's got to give.
So in my opinion, there's got to be a balance there too. The best scenario I've seen from a pay perspective is you have to give people some stability. So a hybrid of a base salary and a performance-based pay, so that so they know that if they work harder, they're going to make more money. So I think it's a balance of both, but they have to have the I don't think anybody wants to go to work knowing that they're going to, whether they put in all their effort or no effort, they're going to go home making the same amount.
Oh, I love performance bonus.
Right.
I'm so super huge into performance bonus. I have it for everyone, literally everyone, because we do incentives that are monthly. And for our administrative team, those answering the phones, those scheduling appointments, those doing follow-ups, they actually get a monthly incentive if they reach a certain patient number goal.
Let me ask you, so how did you come up with this? Was it on your own, or is it communicating with other rheumatology practices, or how did you come to this?
So it was actually
it's successful, obviously.
It is. It was in my grad school program. And I did this, I graduated in 2016. So we started our practice in 2007. So I'm, fully like at least 7 years into the practice. And I'm really struggling with my millennial workforce. And I think I've always struggled with that, with the constant need for feedback, right? There's constant feedback that's needed. And I'm like, oh my God, can't you just wait for the annual review? And I also had goals that I wanted to reach. And it was in one of my MBA classes. I think it was like organizational management. And we were talking about incentivizing and performance reviews and what makes people tick and trying to get to what the specific people need. And so I said, oh my God, we need to reach these goals. Let's figure out how to give them more immediate rewards. And I had every employee read the 5 languages of appreciation in the workplace, which is the same authors as the 5 love languages, except I don't think they use physicality. That would probably be very HR inappropriate. So it's the language of appreciation could be words of affirmation. That's one. The other one is acts of service. Mine's acts of service. Like, don't buy me the coffee, but man, here's $20. When you go to Starbucks, this is the drink that I like. That is my act of service. The other one is gifts. So people want tangible gifts, and money would be one of the gifts. And then the fourth one would be quality of time. So spending time with certain employees. And I realized that a lot of my millennials were surrounded around words of affirmation and gifts.
Interesting. I do think that the right approach is that it has to be highly personal. And you have to know what motivates which people. And I'll give you an example. I used to manage furniture stores when I first moved to Florida. I was in furniture sales, and then I started running some furniture showrooms. And I realized that each salesperson was just completely different. And maybe it was their family that motivated them. And some of them were money. And you had to first learn that and take the time to learn that. And I think that's very important. People don't care how much you know until they know how much you care. And learning that, and then remembering it when you're communicating with them and the way that they like to be communicated with. It's even that, it gets even that granular. But if you can adapt to learning those things and know what motivates people and what speaks to them, what resonates with them, then you can, tailor your communication to that. And again, I think the baseline has to be that they have to know that you genuinely care about them.
But you may genuinely care, but you're not exhibiting it in the way that somebody needs to hear it. So I know that I've said it before on the podcast, but I have a physician assistant who I don't text anymore. Like, I literally have to have a verbal conversation with him because he misinterprets it. And they say 50% of text messages are misinterpreted. I would say if I text him, 99% of the messages I send him are misinterpreted. I'm like, you have known me forever. Come on. So I will text him and say, hey, can you stop by my office before you leave for the day? Like, that's what I do. Or, hey, can I give you a call later? that is what I have to do. It's never anything else because it's misinterpreted. He really likes to have that conversation. He hates texting. Emailing, oh my God, that's way worse than texting. I can't do that. But going back to my millennial team members, we would have 2 different tiers for patient appointments, like total kept appointments. And it also helped decrease our no-call, no-show rate or last-minute cancellation rate, or have our team create an actual list of a waiting list. So if somebody cancels at the last minute or gives us a few hours notice, we actually have a list we can work off of and move those patients into those appointment spots. And I saw a huge increase in that because I would give them a $25 Amex gift card if they reached one tier. And if they could reach the other tier, they would get a $50 Amex gift card. I swear, because of inflation, I think we're up to like $100 for certain things, but wow. But let me tell you, they kick butt and they get so excited. So I remember one of my team members, when I started implementing it, I'm like, how are you going to do this month? She said, Meredith, I'm going to get 2 manicures this month. So that's what they would do. That's what millennials do. They earn to spend.
Do you know, so how are you tracking no-shows? Is your system doing it?
Yeah.
Are you doing it? And you know what your percentage is?
Oh my God, it's incredibly low. Do you know what the benchmark is?
I know what the average is.
What's the average?
20%.
Oh crap. Are you kidding? No. What do you constitute a no-call, no-show?
That varies. It varies.
So you have to know what I love statistics.
And also it comes down to the system and whether they're getting text messages and whether they respond to the text messages.
No. So. I mean, we separate one with no call, no show, like literally they don't show up.
Right.
And then we have a last minute cancellation. So if they cancel within 24 hours, so they're 2 separate numbers.
Do you charge patients ever?
I do, but I do one of 2 things. It depends. Giving out my whole secret sauce, Mike. Oh my gosh. So we do say that we will charge, and we also have a walkout fee if people walk out. Oh, so wow. I have patients, our average patient age is 76. They sometimes think they can come in early and they'll be seen early, but I can't bump someone who has an appointment earlier than you. And we always let them know. But if they're waiting 5 minutes, 10 minutes, they're like, I have somewhere else to be. We always say a lot, an hour and a half for your appointment. Right. So they want to leave in 20 minutes. I'm like, yeah, no. So we do charge a walkout fee. We seldom have to do that. Hopefully we're good enough to like salvage it. And we don't want patients to wait. We don't want them to wait. It's rude, right? Your time is valuable. Sometimes we screw up though. You know, rheumatology can be very complex. Yeah. So we can't just go around and twiddle our thumbs waiting for patients either.
Right. That's why I love this podcast, because you're sharing the information. And like, if you weren't sharing this information, how would a rheumatologist in the middle of Ohio know what best practices are? And I talked about on the last
I'm going to
episode.
have Dr. Matt Mundweiler on this podcast, and he's in the middle of Ohio. And I expect to ask him a lot of really awesome business questions because he is a total business guy. And
it comes down to networking and the rheumatology community and going to these meetings and just, asking questions. I said the last time that a lot don't do that or don't share. And when you talk about finances, that's very touchy also, and how they pay their employees, things like that. But I think it's beneficial for everyone to share information, because you're going to, hopefully you'll teach somebody something, but you'll also learn something.
Doctors are not good about divulging and sharing this information. They keep it very close to their chest. And my husband used to say to me, why are you telling everybody our secrets? Why do you tell everybody everything we do? And I would say, Mark, I am giving them the recipe. It doesn't mean that they'll be able to make the same cookie. And the truth is, if we don't work together, we're not going to survive.
Right. And what that's called is a famine mentality. There's enough for everybody, and their success doesn't determine your success. And in my opinion, it's the opposite. If they're more successful, everyone is more successful. In turn, you're more successful. So that's why I'm all for give it all away, share all the information.
I do too. I think so too. And lawyers do a really great job of that. Like lawyers, if you go from one law firm to another law firm to another, they throw you a party and they celebrate when you go and leave them. It's crazy. Right. We scorn you. We spit at you. We call you vulgar names behind your back. I'm like, who are you? Like, why? That's not normal. Like the whole goal is, right, build an amazing culture where people want to stay. Continue to remain connected. Yeah. I'm losing a doctor. It's really hard for us. She's been with us for 10 years. I never thought she would leave, but it's not something I can fix. Mm-hmm. And I know that she tried in every way to stay, but she actually has to move out of the area, and it's for personal family reasons. And our team is really heartbroken about it.
That's one of the major indicators for a good culture in an office. And one of the first things that I would ask when walking into a new office, if we're partnering with them, I ask every employee I talk to how long they've been there. If they have high turnover, there's an issue, and it's probably the culture. It's probably the leadership.
Yeah, but I've had high turnover that I've never had before. And I tend to have it in the under 1 year mark.
Interesting.
I don't know if I'm hiring wrong. We have a new HR director, and one of her goals for this year is to look at and identify the reason for the turnover.
Do you do exit interviews?
We do.
Okay.
A lot of it. So I'm gonna answer your question, and then I'm gonna go back to my second question or issue. I was going to talk about burnout because that's really the big factor. So what is my no call, no show rate? So the benchmark, and this is for people who just don't show up. They don't even call, right? Just don't show up. The benchmark is 5%. That's supposed to be the industry benchmark. That is what you try to attain. Ours hovers just under 2%.
I asked how you track it because at my last company, one of the things that we would ask is, do you have a lot of no call, no shows? And they would say no. And I would say, well, what's the percentage? And they would say, most of them wouldn't know. Mm-hmm.
It's so important to track it. And we color code everything. I mean, if we could have, oh my gosh, we use NextGen, and we have so highly utilized and personalized a lot of the scheduling software, and even all the templates. We have like 300 customized templates. It's awful. Anytime we have to upgrade, it's like, I was going to curse, but I feel like my podcast needs to stay G-rated. But it's a crap show. But there are benefits to it, and we can pull certain data, but we need to make sure that it's discrete data and able to pull it. But yeah, your data or your analysis or your review is not going to be good unless you know that the data is good.
Right.
So let's go back to my second reason for wanting to sell out to private equity, right? So the first one is maybe succession planning. We have to build a great company culture, okay? And you said, well, when you go into a medical office, you want to know what's your turnover. And I said, I've never had such high turnover. I know that I'm having an issue right now, specifically in about the 1 year mark, okay? It's either very, very early on, but it's typically at the 1 year mark. And I would say, during our exit interviews, what I hear most, or the feedback given to me, is we just have too much work to do. It's more of that burnout.
Well, are there any consistencies in the reason for leaving, like their real reason for leaving? And I would recommend somebody that is maybe not even part of your office or somebody that they had worked for, because then they'll be more honest, and honesty's important.
You don't think people are being bluntly honest when they're walking out the door?
Not with even you in a leadership
I'm not the one
position.
who interviews them. I'd scare the crap out of them. I'm not the one interviewing them. But it's typically our HR manager, HR director, whoever we had in that role previously.
Yeah, because I mean, if it's consistently like,
oh my God,
they're not making enough
information.
pay or something, then you need to,
It's not. So. Now, there was this one guy back 50 years ago. There's this one guy we really liked. He was an X-ray tech, but he was offered sort of like all the nurses, right? We lost all these nurses because they were offered positions as travel nurses. So they were making so much money. There's no way that we could match that. So this guy was actually doing travel X-ray work, and he had a more flexible schedule. So he was able to work 3 12-hour shifts as opposed to 5 days a week for 8 hours. And he still got benefits for working 36 hours. I just don't know how to make that work, but it wasn't even that. In my brain started like spinning and going, okay, how could I make that work? And then it was, but I'm also getting $10 more an hour. And I'm like, okay, done. I can't.
Yeah. So
I can't.
It's not, high turnover isn't always directly related to like an unhealthy culture, because like market trends and what the bigger entities like hospitals are doing also affect the turnover. So at my last company, we realized that a lot more rheumatologists were going to hospitals, and we learned that hospitals all started to pay more. And that trend has changed. They were giving, let's say, a guaranteed salary for 5 years to a rheumatologist, then it went to 3. Then they realized they could give 1, and then they go to RVUs and they don't even understand the RVU system. And then then their turnover becomes higher. So it's even what the larger entities are doing, what the market trends are. And that's why it's important to stay abreast to all those things.
So when I was in school back in the day, but again, my executive MBA program, we learned that people don't leave for money. That usually is not highly correlated for the reason why people leave. However, do you think that's changed over time? Do you think this younger generation has a higher correlation with money to happiness or staying with a job?
I think that's changed. I think it's more, so I went to, I was traveling. I went to Atlanta and saw a speaker he was a healthcare executive, incredibly successful guy, younger than me, and is done. He's retired. And he's speaking.
But do you think
now.
You'll ever retire? Come on.
No.
You could do the Stairmaster more during the day.
So he was saying that the interesting thing that they learned about the newer generation is that you didn't necessarily have to give them ownership. They just wanted to be called owners, or at least tell people that they're owners.
The title.
So it goes back to like perception, and it's probably a function of all this social media and because everything is perception on social media and not necessarily reality. So he said it was one of the most interesting things that they just wanted to tell people that they were owners, but you didn't even necessarily have to give them quote unquote ownership.
Well, it's funny because my husband calls our fellow physicians his partners. He's like, but they are my partners. We chat about stuff all the time. I'm like, okay, great. I'm your partner too. But yes, that's what he calls them, partners.
One really interesting thing that they did in their healthcare company was create tiers, just so there would be like a perception of, of growth. So let's say like they'd have an MA1, MA2, and he said that changed everything.
It's interesting you say that because we're finally going on to an HRIS system. Like every other industry in the world is probably on an HRIS system except for healthcare, or maybe it's just the Hirsh Center. I don't know. Yeah. But I had a meeting prior to meeting you at the podcast studio with our HR director and Krista, who is going to be on an upcoming episode of Working Healthcare. I haven't interviewed her yet, so we don't know what we're talking about yet, but I'm super excited to have her. But the three of us were talking about onboarding our HRIS system, and Krista has experience doing this, and so does our HR director. I don't. I started the Hirsh Center when I was 33 years old, and it's the only company in which I've ever managed. So yeah, no, I've never done that. So I really ask them for feedback and advice. And it's what Krista said. She said, don't worry about the job titles we're giving them now in the system. We're actually going to revamp it and put them into, what did you call it? You called it something.
Tiers.
Yes, like a tiered system. So we have clinical assistants. So they have CA1, CA2, CA3, and we put compensation for each of those tiers. So then people know that there is an opportunity to grow, even if they stay a clinical assistant. What do they need to do to get to that next tier to make a little bit more money? I thought that was really cool. But it's just what you said.
But it comes down to what we were talking about before in what motivates people. And people are motivated by different things. And as long as you learn those things and kind of, accommodate that, then they'll respond.
Let's talk about AI, because we talked a little bit about it, just briefly touched upon it in your first podcast episode. but AI is booming, and everywhere I go, and this is my goal actually this year at conferences. So every year I go in with a goal. Because my goal as a CEO is I'm either generating revenue, right? Decreasing expenses or increasing efficiency. And at this point, I really need to work on a lot of our efficiency. We are so overwhelmed with manual processes. So I want to look at AI and going to all these conferences. So anybody listening to this podcast, if you are AI and you want to work on your 60-second elevator pitch to me, do that, because I'm not sitting there listening for 5 minutes. I have a short attention span. So I want to learn how I can make things more efficient. How do you even know what AI options are available? How do you know what one is going to work? Because I feel like I've tried unsuccessfully to add certain AI options on years ago, not even years ago, like a year ago, 2 years ago, and I've had to abort. Where do I start?
The answer is that you don't. It's impossible unless you know somebody that's used that particular technology. And I would even say, take a more measured approach to AI, because like I said last time, every day I get messages from AI companies doing different things, and you really have to be careful who you're utilizing. And, let's be honest, in healthcare, our data it's sensitive, and you can't just tie any technology into your system. And we saw what happened with, was it Change?
Yeah, Change Healthcare.
So you have to be careful. It's a balance, and there's a fine line between risk and being reckless. So you have to be very careful with who you're using, but I would say learn about them as quickly as you can, and just, if you can take dip your toe in the water with the technology, try that. Because I wouldn't, especially in an office, once you tie something in, the workflows in an office are set.
So I'll tell you what we did with our EHR, and my brain is sort of slowly spinning and thinking about how we're going to do this. And it takes time, right? Because I have no patience and I want to jump in head first. And I give everybody 500 ideas of what I want to do when I get back from a conference. And they're like, hold tight, Meredith. We cannot do everything you want us to do. We're all going to leave. So I swear, I think there have been like threatened walkouts. But what we did with our EHR, the first time we onboarded with an EHR was in 2011. It was literally April 4th, 2011.
Wow.
Guess when we offboarded?
When?
3 weeks later. It was horrific. It was horrible. I thought I did my due diligence, but I didn't. And the second time around, I'm like, okay, that was $100,000 mistake. That was $100,000 mistake. And I'm like, I am not going to make that mistake again. So we did our research and looked at companies that were in the rheumatology space and the orthopedic space, because we're very procedure based. We do a lot of non-surgical orthopedics. So I'm like, okay, we need to make sure that we can handle the x-rays, the ultrasound that we do, the joint injections, all of that. And then, okay, let's also look at the rheumatology world and what's big there, what is going to stick around, because at that point they were everywhere, right? And then in order to get a bonus, they needed to be signed up specifically with the government and to be accredited or whatever it was that these EHRs had to be. And so we narrowed it down to 2 after interviewing other practices, rheumatology or orthopedics. That was my requirement. We would interview other practices, and we got 3 recommendations for each. That's when we narrowed it down to 2. And then we flew to a practice location that allowed us to literally shadow the clinic for 2 days. We went to Alabama for one, and we went to North Carolina for another. I wanted to see how it worked. And that was smart, because the more that it affects the office, the longer time you should take to make that decision. And as you were talking, I was thinking, I think my best advice with AI certainly would be compartmentalize what you need in the office. So you said admin, but it has to be even more detailed than that. And then compartmentalize them
and then prioritize. So, and let the needs drive your decision, not the AI. So if you have something that comes that sounds great as an AI system, maybe you don't need that specific, outcome. So I would say let that drive first, compartmentalize your actual needs, prioritize them, and then connect the AI to what you're looking for and what you really need.
And I think there can be a lot of efficiencies on the billing side. And I think that's what you have implemented, at least in your company, correct?
So I think our secret sauce is definitely our billers. They're amazing.
Okay.
They know rheumatology. They've been in rheumatology for a long time. They all at least have rheumatology experience. So we haven't related it to billing specifically yet, because like I said, I mean, we've come into practices and they're like, our billing's amazing. We've been with our billers forever. And then we find, one practice, they're a huge practice. Within the first 6 weeks, we found over $2 million. So now they think our billers walk on water, and they're right.
But I think it's important, it's really interesting that you say that. I'm going to make a caveat, or I'm going to deviate a little bit. I like what you said. This practice thought they were so awesome, and then you went in and you reviewed and you found $2 million. I really think anybody should do that, right? Shouldn't you find a company who could come in and truly assess how well you're running certain aspects of your company? Isn't there an opportunity for a consultant who is specialized in an area, come in, be hired, right? I mean, that's why people hire me. I just have no time anymore, so I say no. But go into the clinic and say, oh, let me watch your processes, let me review, and let me see if you really are doing it as efficiently as you can.
Right, because having the perspective of for me, I understand why it's so difficult. They only know what they know, and they're busy working in the business and not so much on the business, because
you have your
they're
blinders
putting out
on
fires all day.
Yeah.
So, it's difficult for an independent practice, but getting others' perspectives and learning as much as possible. And again, leveraging that rheumatology community and asking questions. What are you guys doing that worked well? And, if somebody switched their billing and it resulted in increased revenue, what are some of the things that they found? And, so there's a lot, and this goes right back to burnout, and how could they not be burnt out with all these things to think about?
I know.
And then on top of that, you have the big conglomerates and pharma companies, and everybody's conspiring. My business partner's big on rheumatologists need to get bigger together. That's difficult. And I don't think that anybody necessarily disagrees with that, but how do you do that? And how do you find a group that you trust enough to go in together with? And, the markets change, especially, I think the big super groups in rheumatology at least came out in like 2014, and they're going through a lot of changes. So the perspective has changed there too.
I was going to say, I feel like it came out, the discussions were even pre-2014.
2010 probably.
Yeah. Because I remember sitting at some of those initial meetings and then realizing, no, I don't want them as partners. And it wasn't a negative to them. It was also the physicians that you were surrounding yourself with. I didn't know if that's what I wanted. And then trusting that somebody else was going to take care of my baby. This is my fourth child, the company, going to take care of my baby as well as I would. Yeah.
You have to have the utmost trust. And what I've seen it come down to is rheumatologists want their autonomy. But what is autonomy? Autonomy to me might mean something different to you. So, that makes it difficult as well. But
there has to be a solution. I did not go to CCR. It was the only conference, I think, in rheumatology that I haven't been to in the last 365 days. But CCR I did not go to. But going there, and when people say, how do you learn? How do you meet people? And you and I always talk to different people. And we know, you were even sharing with me, oh, I had people who told me they really liked the episode. I had a guy I've known for 10 years. I don't even think he knew my name. And he was like, hey, Mike, I listened to your episode in Working Healthcare with Meredith. And I'm like, I don't even know who that guy is. But going there, you learn different ideas. You talk to your colleagues. You meet people who, because you don't know everything. I think the best thing is to understand you don't know everything. None of us do.
Right. And just sharing information, just putting information out there like you have been doing and just sharing information. And you don't have all the answers. We don't have all the answers, but sharing information makes progress. And that's really all it comes down to.
Yeah. I want to focus a little bit more on how we're moving from this burnout, hiring people, and now it seems to switch into an employer's market as opposed to an employee's market, right? You were asking me about, there has to be a reason, Meredith, why you can't keep employees under a year. And listen, there are a couple of employees I have who I know are going to med school, right? They're my clinical assistants and they're going to be here a year and a half. That's awesome. I already know that. I'm cool with it. But there are other employees. I think we made a lot of wrong hires because we got desperate. And now we're not getting the turnover we had because I think there's a shift going on right now.
There's a lot of shifts going on right now.
But do you see that even though being more of an employer's market as opposed to an employee's market where an employee's offered 5 different jobs and they decide which one they want, now employees are having a harder time landing a job?
Yeah. And I think from my perspective, having been in business and run businesses for, 20 years, it seems as though people are becoming less and less entrepreneurial. I don't know what the reason for that is, but it seems that way. So I think that's a result. What you just talked about is a result of that.
Let's talk about patience. So I was asked at the Florida Society of Rheumatology meeting to talk about reputation management online. Mm-hmm. By the way, I was only given 12 minutes to talk about it, so I guess it's going to be a really short topic. But reputation management. In the rheumatology world, there aren't a lot who focus on their Google reviews. If you go to dermatology, like my brother's practice, I don't know, what does he have, 2,000 Google reviews? It's like 5-star, 4.9 or whatever it is. How important is reputation management and Google reviews for a practice to be successful?
It's incredibly important because especially millennials in the newer generations, that's the first thing they're doing is looking online to see what the reviews are. I'll give you an interesting factoid. Do you know what the most common review for a doctor's office is?
A 1-star?
Negative review.
Yeah.
What the most common negative review is? Parking.
Wait time.
Parking.
Oh, parking?
Yeah.
I've never gotten a parking one.
And I can't remember.
I get that you don't take my health insurance. I'm like, really? You give me a 1-star review because I don't take your health insurance?
So the unfortunate part is, and you won't know until you start to really manage your online reputation, is that it's something like 80-ish% don't even relate to the doctor or the patient care that they gave, which is unfortunate because that's what you want to know. And that's what's most important. Which
is me, right? We don't take their health insurance. But I also say about reputation management, and I agree with you, and I wouldn't even say millennials. I always look at Google reviews. And the problem is a lot of the doctors I go to, people swear by them. Like, oh my God, they have 7 Google reviews. How do you only have 7? And it's not even updated, right? You go onto Google and it's like a screenshot. It's like a street view.
Yeah. I mean, they carry so much weight and they're not even very accurate typically, because when we start to partner with doctors, we obviously look at their reviews, and some I know are amazing doctors, but their reviews, and I'll ask them, do you know what your Google reviews are? And they have no idea. And maybe they don't understand or realize or accept that they're so important and carry so much weight. But yeah, they absolutely do.
I'm going to go back to what you said as an example for saying this. You said, and I said this at the very beginning because you're the one who said this to me the other day, we have to play to win. We can't play not to lose. And I'm going to say that even with Google reviews, you can't just say, hey, let's see what happens. See if someone leaves me a review. You have to actively participate in garnering positive reviews.
Yeah. And it comes down to mindset and perspective, because It's a completely different perspective, as I just don't want bad reviews as opposed to I want amazing reviews. It's just a slight shift in the perspective or the approach, but it makes all the difference in the world.
So I'm going to switch to one final topic. I want to talk a little bit about ancillaries because I have a doctor who's coming in later this week. Oh my goodness, later this week for like a 6-month recap. We're going to talk about the first 2 quarters that he was in practice, see where he's at. And he's a phenomenal doctor. I've actually never had anybody get so many new patients, like have a wait for new patients. He is really thriving and he's become very popular very quickly, which is phenomenal. Great doctor, but he's not utilizing ancillaries. And so when we want to correlate his success with patient care versus success with income, you have to look at the use of ancillaries. Can you sort of describe the need for ancillaries in a medical practice, why a doctor would use it, why it's important, and not just from a business perspective, because they're like, oh, Meredith, you're going to be a money grubber. You're the business side. Like ancillaries, especially in the office, can help in the patient care.
Yeah, I think it comes down to, well, there are different practice models, obviously. If you have a practice model, which I wouldn't necessarily recommend, but they do exist. If it's high volume, low margin, you're not utilizing ancillaries very well. You're not spending much time with the patients.
Like internists, right? Or pediatricians, except they do vaccines. So there's their answer.
So you've got to have that right mix of, not necessarily low volume, but the right volume where you're delivering quality patient care, but utilizing the ancillaries. First and foremost, it has to be what's best for the patient, and then the money should come second. Mm-hmm. Is this best for the patient? Number one. Number two, is it good for the business? Can we actually keep the lights on by doing this? But like I said, it comes down to what's best for the patient. Our biggest group in our company, like I said, I don't know what the right mix is. They see like 18 patients a day, 18 to 20. Mm-hmm. They work 4 days a week and they all do very, very well financially. They've got like the perfect balance. Their patients love them. Their staff turnover is very low. Mm-hmm.
Do you think it has anything to do with their insurance contracts, though? I don't know where this is located, and I'm sure you don't want to say, but in South Florida, right, Medicare is our highest payer typically.
Right, and I'm glad you brought that up because there are things within the healthcare industry that are driving patient care that shouldn't be. That's one of them.
Yeah. It's the biggest challenge.
Absolutely. You can't get around that. If sometimes in some areas of Florida, you have to be high volume or you're not going to stay open.
I mean, people want to know.
Be high volume.
People want to know why I can't see Aetna. Why can't I see Aetna? Because they want to pay me 70% of Medicare allowable, and not just 70% of Medicare allowable. They also don't allow procedures on the same day as an office visit. So now patients have to pay double copays because they're coming back twice, and I'm wasting on the business mind, right? On the business person, I'm wasting 2 appointment spots for the evaluation and management and then the procedure. And it doesn't make sense. So the cost is spread, the revenue is spread out over 2 appointment slots instead of 1, and it costs the patient more. And I'm getting 70% of Medicare. I can't afford to take Aetna.
Yeah. And like I said, this comes back to things that are driving healthcare and patient care that shouldn't be. A doctor shouldn't have to think about whether this patient's going to be covered or not. They should think about, how do I best serve this patient? How do I get this patient healthier faster? That's what they should be thinking about. But they're forced by the healthcare system to think about these things, because if they don't, they won't remain in business and they can't be doctors anymore.
So then we have to figure that out for our next podcast topic, because I'm going to include you with different interviews that we have.
Great.
We'll get your perspective. Although, I'll tell you, I realized looking back, I had 12 guys in a row scheduled for podcast interviews. And I was like, Oh, yeah.
Need to mix it up.
That can't happen. You know me. I'm like a girl's girl. I love guys, but as a feminist, I cannot allow that. So I had to work very hard to get certain women involved. But I go, you know what? Mike can give a different perspective. He can be the low-key one, not the hyper one like me.
I'm just excited about the opportunity to potentially bring value. And even if it's, resonating with one person, I told you this on the phone. I feel almost indebted to this platform of podcasts / YouTube videos because, and I told you about this on the phone, but there was a 5-minute excerpt, and I ended up finding out it was Tony Robbins, but I didn't know what it was, and it had such a profound effect on me. I was jogging at the time. This is way back. This must have been like 1999 or something when the internet was just, and I would just download
I don't
these.
think you were listening to the internet as you were jogging.
Maybe it was 2001. Who knows? I'm terrible with time. But it had such a profound effect on me, just that 5 minutes, that I started looking more into these things and still to this day, almost every day I'm listening to, something positive, motivational videos on YouTube or whatever it is. But just the opportunity to potentially put some positive information out there and bring value to someone is I'm grateful for.
We need to unite. We all need to work together if we're going to create change within this healthcare system. It can't just be me.
Yep.
It can't just be you. It can't just be the same 100 people that show up at a national advocacy conference every single year.
Right.
We all need to work together.
It's true.
So this was good.
Thank you.
I have a new website now.
Great.
That's super cool. It's meredithhirsh.com. They just have to spell my name properly. meredithhirsh.com. And people can submit ideas for the show, which is really cool. And they can submit questions. They can submit guests that they would like to have on the show, ideas, or if you yourself, not you, Mike, because you're already part of this shindig, but for anybody listening, if they're like, oh my gosh, I have this amazing niche within our American healthcare system, I would love to talk about it. I have to agree it's okay. But go ahead and go on to meredithhirsh.com and go ahead and submit so I can review and respond. Isn't that
Amazing.
Cool?
That's awesome.
And then I also want to start airing these on YouTube.
Great.
I'm not going to watch it on YouTube, but maybe people will like to watch you on YouTube. Maybe me, they'll see my lovely red bow today. I said, I'm coming as a gift today, or I'm coming as a matador, but all black with my red bow. But I thought, red bow, I'm a gift. But this was fun. Thank you.
This was fun. Thank you.
If you like this episode and want to learn more about the inner workings of our American healthcare system, follow Working Healthcare on your favorite podcast platform. New episodes are available every Tuesday. To watch short clips of past and upcoming episodes, including today's interview, follow Working Healthcare on Instagram, Facebook, or YouTube. Tune in weekly with me, Meredith Hirsh, as we explore the inner workings of healthcare.
You ready? You got me running, got me running. Take it.